Blind Nil Audio.
I'm Alex L.
I'm Libby Delana. Welcome
to This Morning Walk podcast.
Hi, Becca.
Hi, Libby.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Well, I'm really great now that I see you. I mean, it's been a little too long since you and I last spoke. I'm trying to think when we did. It was middle of the winter, maybe?
I know. I think that's true. But I'm also going to see you soon. So I feel really comforted by the fact that we're getting to talk and then it's followed up by a visit.
I know. In 2 weeks, we're going to be in Telluride together, Mountain Film.
That's right. That's right.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, so let's just start with this, though. Telluride's at 9,000 feet, right?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around there.
Oh, for God's sakes. Right. As the person speaking who is terrible at altitude. Well, you and I will be going for a very, very, very slow walk.
Yes, I love that idea. Yeah,
oh
I was there a couple of years ago and some friends were training for an ultra marathon and they went for like a 17-mile run. And I was so impressed because it's just functioning at that altitude is hard enough, let alone running for a long time.
I know. I think I'm at 1, maybe sea level, maybe 0. So it's a little bit of a shift. Okay, so Walk Stars, this is one of my super, very, very dear friend, Becca Skinner, regenerative farmer, beekeeper. What else can I say about you? Incredible fly fisherman. We've been on some wonderful fly fishing adventure together in your backyard, basically. Photographer, conservationist, Nat Geo explorer, just to name a few things. And oh, by the way, in the last year, started a beautiful, beautiful shop in Livingston, Montana called Kith Ship. I'm so happy for you. It's so incredible. Tell us about Kith Ship.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been, I've been a freelance photographer since my early 20s. So one of the best parts of Kith Ship is it's a combination of my years as a photographer, but it's also really honoring the space that I'm in now, which is I'm leaning into design and Kith Ship itself. It means whom you share a common affinity of place or connection to the land that you live. And so it's all about the spaces that we're in, the land that we live on, trying to incorporate land and design and bring that confluence into people's homes and front and center. So it just feels like a continuation of my years as a creative and photographer, which I'm still doing. But I feel so proud of that space. It's the first tangible space that's really open to the public that I've gotten to create, and it feels so good.
Okay, so Becca, truth of the matter is, I don't really remember how we met. How did we meet? I kind of remember. You're currently in Bozeman, Montana. I'm in Newburyport, Massachusetts. I was lucky enough to be part of your wedding ceremonies, but I don't really think I remember how we met. Do you? We lost her. Oh, there we go.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Great. Well, I'm going to jump in where I thought I heard you say as I lost you too. So yeah, we're in Bozeman. I met you through Eduardo. Was on a phone call. My husband Eduardo at the time, he was just my boyfriend. He was on a phone call with you about business opportunities, and we were in the car together.
And you were in his pickup truck.
Yes, we were in the pickup truck together, and he put you on speakerphone, and I had started following you on Instagram, and turns out you had used some of my imagery on your vision board for falconry years and years ago. And so it was meant to be that we were meant to be connected through Eduardo. And then eventually And of course, because you're a lovely human and who doesn't love you and want to adopt you into our family, we asked you to marry us years later. And that felt so right. And it was perfect.
It was perfect. You know, it's funny because I now have a precise image of the two of you calling from his car. And I think after that call, I may have texted him and said, you know what? I had this flash while we were talking that you two are going to be together for the rest of your life. And I'm not a matchmaker. That's not the kind of thing I do. But I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely perfect. I'm so in love with the two of them. This makes so much sense. Yes, I admired you. I might have verged on stalking your image. I mean, I just think your photography is mind blowing. And of course, I think your darling spouse, Eduardo, is fabulous too. But I do remember that phone call. We were talking about a project that we were working on. We were about to start filming, and he said something like, "You won't believe who's in the car." I think is it possible I might have said, "Is Becca Skinner in your car?"
Yes.
I don't, who knows? So yes, and it's been a love affair ever since. But and whenever I'm in Montana, I come visit you, and we go fly fishing, and we walk. We've walked a lot together. It's pretty great.
Yeah, and some beautiful spots.
Some beautiful spots,
in
including right out your back door over a little tiny, tiny brook. And there's usually elk out in the field, coyotes, and
Yeah.
Eduardo and I have been on, I don't think you were with us on this one walk we went on, which was we were foraging for golden morels. Incredible, beautiful, and delicious.
That sounds so perfect. I like to imagine you two doing that together. That just feels so perfect to your friendship and how I know both of you.
So, yes, you were very kind to ask me to be the officiant at your wedding. I remember it being so moved by the two of you, and honestly, I just was so honored. It was one of the most beautiful coming together of two beautiful souls I'd ever been to. Yeah. So, what do you remember? Well,
Well,
how about the night before with the rainbow over the two of you? For heaven's sakes!
I know we got married on this ranch, this family ranch that Eduardo grew up behind in a small town in Montana, and they've turned into good friends. And so it's this big, big field, and there are cows all around, and you're looking right at the mountains. I mean, it is so beautiful. And we did a multi-day celebration because we had a very large wedding, which I know Libby was so gracious to talk me through because I'm such an introverted person. And Eduardo is deeply extroverted. And so it felt so perfect and right, but I was a little panicked beforehand at just how many people were going to be there witnessing us because we love them all. And the night before we got married, there was a huge rainstorm, and a rainbow popped out. And it was the most beautiful. I mean, the whole weekend was beautiful, but that felt like um, a little special blessing for us in that weekend. And then it rained the day of, a torrential downpour, and it cleared out all of the mosquitoes out of the ranch fields. And then we got married. And Libby was just, it was so perfect. And so you're so commanding. I think you just carry a presence that's so welcoming and lovely and open and also commanding. And people forever, when I say, "Oh, you know my friend Libby, she wore the black dress with the beautiful necklace," and they say, "Oh, I remember Libby. That was special." say yeah.
Well, what I remember is, well, that's very kind, thank you. But I just so remember the sheer joy of everybody.
Mm.
You had, and Eduardo had put together this beautiful lamb. Was it lamb?
Was it
I
elk?
can't. Elk, yeah, elk meal. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
so joyous, and there was just an energy of playfulness. It was really, it was unlike any wedding I've been to, and it felt so perfect for the two of you right outside Yellowstone. It was, um, I just adore you and feel really grateful to have been there at that moment. And I know, and standing in front of all those people, that was it was a big moment. And Eduardo came riding in on a horse, hooting and hollering.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, which is again just lovely and perfect. But yeah, the whole weekend was filled with affection and beauty. And thank you for asking me.
Yeah. Thanks for doing it.
It was
That,
elk. It
that was,
wasn't lamb. Of course, it was elk. For God's
yeah,
sakes.
the day we got engaged, we were on an elk hunt. And so we kept and harvested and kept that elk. And a friend helped Eduardo make it into sausages for our wedding meal. So we fed people um, a meal that we had largely hunted and hauled out of the backcountry on the day we got engaged.
Genius, fantastic.
Special.
You also, in this past year, you have an incredible walking practice. I would say that um, your walks in the wilds of Montana have been always very inspirational from from a number of perspectives. And I would say that you also had a walking buddy who you walked
Mm-hmm.
with for years, more than a decade. And that walking buddy, that partnership has transitioned and changed. And I wonder if you can share a little bit about share that story, share where you are in that process and how
Yeah,
you're feeling. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for the invitation to share about her because, um, yeah, I found Veda when I was 17, almost 18, from a local shelter. And I knew that I needed a dog. I was deeply depressed and just really going through it. And I knew I needed to be held accountable to go outside and get out of
Yeah.
bed. And a dog was the only mechanism that felt reasonable and sensible and that it really held the longevity for me.
Mm,
And
mm,
when I found her, it was so perfect. And I'm sure there's a bit of romanticizing it because, as my parents like to remind me, she did cause a little bit of mischief when I first got her. But it felt in so many ways like she was just meant to be in my life so easily. And I was never a big walker before that, but
right.
having to get her out every day um, turned me into a walker. And it was really the beginning of my photography too, because I was taking my camera out when I was going for walks and, at all hours of the day and evening. And I was living in rural Wyoming. And so there are a slew of weather conditions too that we would walk in. And it has been so odd. She was with me for 16 years. So to not have that walking practice, when she died last summer, I just stopped walking um,
Mm-hmm.
because it was painful. And also know. I just didn't know how to
Right.
like resume that practice or just really exist as an adult in the world without her. Um, and it's been a really joyful thing we have a new little addition puppy, Bluegrass is his name, and he's so different, but gosh, he loves a walk. And getting to pick up that practice again has felt so good and right, and it truly felt like something was missing. It's like our whole, or at least my whole day was sort of wonky without a dog as an anchoring point. So it's so different, but I think about her all the time. I think about her every day when I'm walking and otherwise.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I think anybody who's had a pet in their life, pet's not even the right word, a companion is a more appropriate word. Anybody who's had a companion like that in their lives, I think your story really resonates. It's hard to imagine how we do the things we once did without that companionship, without that affection, without that tenderness that we receive from them. And I really honor the insight that the reason you explored bringing her into your life was that you knew that just the way of living for a dog required that we get up and we move and we attend to the outside world. And I think dogs bring so much into our lives, and I know she was incredibly meaningful for you. And I will say, from a distance, I loved watching your love affair, and I know also that going for a walk together can be a real act of mothering for each other as you walk through the world together. The opportunity to care for each other, to point things out, to show each other the treasures on the walk are meaningful. And it's is there a walk or a couple of walks with her that you remember her lessons? I think in walking with companions, and whether they're furry or four legs, two legs, we often show each other really really beautiful things we might not see otherwise. Is there a walk that you remember where she taught you something that you never would have learned otherwise?
I guess the first thing that sticks out to me is the first walk we did where I let her off leash. And
Yeah.
I'm a really fairly anxious person, and especially with things that are so precious to me. And I was walking in her namesake, this spot outside of Laramie called Veda. It's a big climbing area and big recreation site. And I was walking with some friends, and I had said, I just want her to be the best off leash dog. And my friend Chris said, well, that means that you have to let her off leash. I was just like, well, I don't know about that. And I did. And she just sprinted in the opposite direction. And I started to feel this rise of panic. And my dear friend, Chris Hampton, touched my shoulder, and he said, she'll come back. She's just exploring. She's just going to come find you again. And let's keep going. And I remember that feeling of trust. Like I just really had to put a lot of trust in her. And this is I don't know that it felt so monumental at the time, other than it was the first time, but really getting to put my trust in her that she was going to circle back to me. And she did. And that is how she spent the next, truly 16 years of her life living as a mostly off-leash dog. She would go out and come back, and it was, so much trust there. So that's what sticks out to me initially. But we had hundreds of walks together. So there was always something new to see, or new to explore. I think that was the root of her joy, and getting to experience my own joy through her joy. I mean, just too many to count, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what an incredible gift! What an incredible gift to. I mean, in a way, I feel like her expression to you was, "I trust you, and you trust
Mm-hmm.
me, and as we walk through this, that
Mm-hmm.
level of trust is what." It's a pretty unique thing in this world, and I think of you as an explorer, and the way you just described her was, in fact, that way, that she was going out into the world and then she'd come back and touch base with you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think you were reflecting each other. It was this love affair, this exquisite trust in one another, and the supportive nature of trusting each other to go explore in the world, but knowing that you had each other always on
Yeah.
these moments. And that to me is such a unique thing in this world. To have that show up in your life is so powerful. And I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things about going for a walk, is the opportunity for it to be this incredibly, as I said, this sort of mothering space, or this healing space of exploring where our boundaries are, exploring how far we're willing to go from one another, how we support each other in those pouring rainstorms. And um, I can imagine seeing her dash off and then coming back was just, I'm not sure I even know how to describe it, but it's just such I call it a mothering feeling of care and love and nurture. And to do that while we're outside with one another is a really super powerful thing. So I was interested that you shared that, as after her continuation into her new space, you found that you didn't want to walk, which I totally honor and feel and understand. Could you articulate why that was? Was it a feeling that that was a place where you two connected, and um, she wasn't in the physical form anymore, so that was a hard space to be? How do you describe that feeling?
Yeah. Our days while she was here were really anchored with a walk in the morning and on this particular trail behind our house, and then a walk around our neighborhood in the evening.
Mm,
And so, and really, who knows what was inside of those days, so many
right,
days, but it was always bookended with those two things. And so, for a while, it just didn't feel like that space was supposed to be just
right,
mine.
right. Yeah,
Um, so when I did walk, and grief is such an interesting thing, after she died, I just did not want to be anywhere where she had been.
right. Yeah.
Um, and Eduardo and I took a trip out to Wyoming for 5 days to spend in the desert. Once his work had settled down, because she passed in the middle of a just terribly busy season of work, and which was challenging in its own way. And um, once that had settled down, we went out to the desert for a couple days, and I remember walking and feeling like, oh, this is really the first time I've wanted to walk,
Mm,
because this space of Wyoming, and I'm just in a total love affair with Wyoming and have been for my whole life, but the space was so big, and
mm,
that
yeah.
anything that I had or was bringing, there was never
Yeah.
going to be too much. And that felt so relieving, to be in that space and experience grief at the same time. That space really held me in a lovely way. Um, yeah, it's that walking has been such an anchoring point for my days.
Mm.
And
Oh my gosh, your description of just being in the space where there was enough space for you to authentically hold the magnitude of what you were feeling, and having that space hold you back, those big open spaces of Wyoming, that is so just as a visual is so powerful. I can see you in that space. I can see you feeling nurtured and held and comforted in that space. I, 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 that's a really beautiful description. It's yeah, very powerful. And how are you feeling about walks now with Bluegrass? My gosh, he's adorable, for heaven's sakes.
he's he's a cute pup. I mean, we are truly in the phase of puppyhood. Yeah, he's 6 months old, blue heeler, maybe mix. We adopted him from a local shelter also. And yeah, walks are so different. And it's hard because Veda was so sick for a long time,
Mm.
that our walks were really slow and they were methodical. And um, Bluegrass is like fast tornado puppy energy. And so it is just chaos. Yeah, a little bit of chaos. Like a don't eat that. Where are you going? That trust exercise of you will come back to me, right? And he does, but it feels great, but it's so different. It feels great in a different way, which I also think is really relieving. And there's some sadness in that too, just because when you experience that type of love,
Yeah.
you don't want anything less, and this is not less. It's just so different.
Yeah, just so unique. Are
Mm-hmm.
you training him to go on backcountry horse packing trips with you? Is he going to do that with you?
That's the plan.
Yeah.
That's the plan. Yeah. Ooh, dogs
Yeah.
with horses feel like a whole other consideration that we're just starting to dip into, but he's got the energy to definitely keep up with miles and miles per day. So that is the plan, to take him with us.
Well, it's interesting just watching the little videos, and of course he is a different energy. Of course he's a different being, right?
Yeah.
And it I feel as if his energy is so playful and so wide-eyed and so, I mean, it's the way you described her initially, exploring and curious and learning and building that level of trust with you. So um, I can imagine it feels very different, and yet some of the energy, that sort of deeper energy, spirit of it is probably familiar. Not the same, obviously, but I can imagine that process being just a really interesting, curious sort of next phase. And so I guess my last question for you is, if you were to describe what you're walking with right now, how would you describe it? Where are you? What are you walking with? What are you holding dearly? What are you curious about?
That's such a great question, Libby. I feel like I'm in this phase of just so much duality happening.
Mm,
This grief still feels so big and so new. And it has been so wonderful to hear so many different guests on your podcast talk about grief and how that shows up for them. And it's just such a universal feeling in all of its various ways. And so I'm holding a lot of grief, and I'm also birthing this whole new chapter of my life without Veda, my life with Bluegrass, and that partnership just starting, and starting Kithship and seeing that space change and shift. And it's I'm sure I've experienced a lot of duality before, but I feel so much duality right now in my life. And if someone were to ask before this chapter of my life, I would have guessed that I would have felt really overwhelmed by it, but it actually feels very expansive. So I think I'm holding a lot, but it all feels really expansive. And yeah, just exploring this new chapter of life with new partnerships and new creative endeavors. But it feels good.
Well, I think that's certainly part of your beautiful magic, is the ability to take these moments that are challenging, and have a curiosity about them, and hold them with both the tenderness that is required and also the curiosity and opportunity. And maybe they fuel each other. I'm not sure. Do you think so?
I totally think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that all of those inputs really, um, I personally need maybe one to fuel the other. And it's so regenerative in that way, of feeling deeply, which I do, and that feeling the creative work, and the creative work fueling me deeply so that I can feel deeply.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like that's a great me in a nutshell.
Right. Right. Okay, so well, I need to know, how are the bees going? How many hives do you have?
I had four.
Great.
And yeah, I am down to one. I lost
Okay.
3 hives this past year, but interestingly, and my forever learning with bees, as I know you know too, I had forgotten to put a couple frames in this one hive, and they free built, as they do, in the
Yeah.
middle between the space, and that is the hive that has continued to survive. Is I call it the feral hive, and I think that it's because they have a much smaller bee space,
Right.
than any of the other ones with full framed. So that is the one that is just absolutely thriving right now, is the feral
Isn't that
hive.
interesting? Describe what bee space is for those who might not know.
Yeah, bee space is the physical space that a bee might need in between both edges of the honeycomb. And so when you put frames into a hive, it's um, there's a little bit extra. So when they build out, they sort of build it to the appropriate size. But when they're free building, those systems just look so much more intricate and weaving than they do in a straight up and down comb. So yeah, who knows what that it looks like down there when I get the lid off? It's just a beautiful maze of bee space and honey. But they are just, I'm pretty hands off with them because they're thriving on their own.
You know what? I think there's something about this conversation that there's a through line here, which is something about space, big
Mm.
space,
Mm.
and stepping into that beautiful space and using it as I mean, think of the bees. There's more space. Think of you in Wyoming. Think of what Veda did early on by saying, I'm going to go out and explore and then come back. I don't know. There's something very interesting about all those touch points. I guess we all need space. We all need to walk into our space where we can find, I don't know, find ourselves, find what we need.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the bees did. That's what you did. That's what she did.
Mm.
I love
I
that.
love that.
And I love you so
I love
much.
you
Oh my
too,
gosh.
Libby.
And I'm going to see you in 2 weeks.
I know.
Yes.
It feels so
Fantastic.
joyful.
I
So
know.
joyful.
Can we go for a cup of tea and, yeah, a walk?
I would love that. I would love
Okay.
that.
Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for sharing Vita's beautiful story. She's an absolutely magnificent being. I
Mm.
remember always being a little bit scared of dogs in general and few sort of interactions. And my natural instinct is that I'm sort of unable to read dog language. I can read horses, but I can't read dogs. And I remember meeting her and thinking, this being is so wise and tender. Just her way of moving through the world is, you're very lucky to have her in your life for the time you did. I'm sure she was a meaningful, wise teacher. She was to me the few times I met her, and thank you for sharing her story. I hope her continuation is with ease and peaceful sunshine. And
Thanks.
thank you for sharing her story with us.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation to share about her. I love that.
I love you. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
I love you too, Libby. I'll see you soon. Bye.
This Morning Walk is a production of Blind Nil Audio, hosted by me, Alex L.
And me, Libby Delana, produced and edited by Chris Jacobs.
If you find value and meaning in the conversations that Libby and I have, please share the show with a friend and consider leaving a 5-star review. Comments on Apple Podcasts really help us out. When you do that, it introduces this show to a bigger audience. Thank you so much for listening.
You are wonderful. Have a great walk.
The views, information, or opinions expressed in this series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Chip and Joanna Gaines, Blind Nil Audio, nor Magnolia.